After getting information about the attack that had been launched so that Celine could be taken away, Jack was of course furious. He wasn't sure why they were looking for Celine, but he could somehow relate that this was related to him. But all the same, if they wanted him, then why were they going after the people who were close to him? That was completely unacceptable to Jack. So, he stormed out of the villa, completely ignoring the plan that he was having to check his current bank balance. He got into the Bugatti Veyron that was parked just outside the villa. After that, he accelerated towards the exit of the Serenity residential area. When he arrived at the gate, he didn't say anything to the staff members that were located in that area. After the gate was opened, he furiously stepped on the throttle as he accelerated towards the outskirts of the city where the hotel was located. He didn't care about the traffic lights and so on. He was driving at the maximum speed that the road allowed him. But still, he completely ignored several of the traffic rules and ran red lights. Just as he was approaching the hotel, his phone rang again. After he received it, he received information from Denali that they were moving out of the city. This made him frown for a moment, but understood why Denali had decided to do that. Considering the firepower of the people from the stronghold, it was obvious that the hotel was going to be left in ruins in case they fought there. After being given the location where they were heading to, Jack immediately changed the direction. He made sure to use the shortest routes possible. As for the traffic, that was something that he was ignoring by using the roads that didn't have that much traffic. After about 10 minutes, Jack finally arrived outside the city. Just outside here, there was a forest. Although the forest wasn't that big, it was a natural one and not artificially planted. Hurriedly, he used the tracking function that was present on his phone, and immediately located the place that Celine was. And immediately after that, he rushed towards that direction. A few minutes back, Samantha, adorned in her sleek and state-of-the-art modern armor, faced off against Denali. She didn't want to waste any more time, because the longer she spent here, the higher the chances of Eric arriving before she accomplished what had brought her here. Even though she knew that Denali was stronger than her, she was currently confident that she was going to win. Since Denali didn't have any weapon or equipment, then this was going to be an advantageous situation for her. Samantha, confident in her laser weapons, rushed towards Denali with her armor gleaming in the sunlight. The armor, fashioned from a futuristic composite material, fit her like a second skin, providing her with enhanced protection and agility. Her speed was top-notch as she rushed at Denali. Since she had engaged in fights for a very long period of time, she knew that she had to take the initiative. As she rushed forward, she immediately began activating her weapons. She was ready to utilize her full strength from the beginning. She was facing a person who was one level higher than her after all. Her laser weapons hummed with untapped energy, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. However, Denali, although she lacked fancy gadgets and advanced technology, she exuded an aura of raw power and unwavering determination. Denali was going to rely solely on her well-honed combat skills and internal fortitude to face her opponent. Though at a disadvantage due to the absence of specialized equipment, Denali's unwavering courage radiated like a beacon, making it clear she won't back down easily. There was no way that she was going to allow Samantha to take away Celine. Samantha made the first move by unleashing a barrage of laser beams towards Denali. The lasers sliced through the air with a deadly precision, creating sizzling arcs that painted the battlefield with a vibrant display of energy. The laser beams were blue in color, and they illuminated the surroundings as they shot towards Denali. Denali, without technologically advanced armor to shield her from the laser onslaught, relied on her unparalleled reflexes to dodge and weave through the chaos. Although it was true that the laser beams were faster, Denali was able to make minute movement, evading the lasers just by a tiny distance. It was in such a way that, if the laser beams diverted for even an inch, then Denali had been hit. As for Celine, she was standing at the side, nervously hoping that Denali managed to hold on. Even though she could have really wished for Denali to win, she knew the way that the current situation was. Denali was the one who was at a disadvantage. So, it was good enough that she was able to hold on, and even though she had taken the body-strengthening solution, she could tell that in case she was the one who was facing the barrage of laser beams, she would be taken down in a single shot. Looking at the devastated ground and trees that had already been blown into splinters, he couldn't help but gulp at the intense firepower of the laser beams. Denali skillfully evaded the beams, demonstrating an uncanny ability to anticipate Samantha's moves, despite the lack of visual aids. Denali's movements became a fluid dance, as she expertly avoided each attack thrown her way. I think you should take a look at." Samantha maneuvered deftly, exploiting her armor's capabilities to unleash a relentless assault. She would at times engage Denali at close combat, but she was always blown backwards. Even though she was having an armor, that didn't prevent her from being blown backwards from the sheer of strength that Denali possessed. As for landing a punch on her, that was something that she found completely impossible. If Denali was able to evade the laser beams, then there was no way that she was going to hit her physically. She had to depend on the laser weapons, as the laser beams were faster than herself. As the fight progressed, Samantha realized that her laser weapons alone might not be enough to defeat Denali. Her advanced armor, while providing superior protection, failed to give her an edge in strength and resilience. Denali, fueled by sheer determination, capitalized on this moment of doubt. She knew that she had to take all the chances to make sure that she managed to hold on a little long. But at the same time, although she was hoping that Jack could come, she was also hoping that he wouldn't come. After all, facing the laser beams, she just knew how dangerous they were. As long as they managed to hit her, then there was no way that she was going to continue the fight. After all, if her leg was hit, her movements would not as precise as they currently were. That alone was a disadvantage that would enable Samantha to capitalize on. With a fierce battle cry, Denali broke through Samantha's defenses, delivering a series of powerful strikes with her bare hands. Each punch and kick landed with incredible force, utilizing raw strength as her greatest weapon. Samantha struggled to withstand the blows, her armor straining under the relentless assault. Caught off guard by Denali's tenacity, Samantha recalibrated her strategy. Instead of relying solely on her high-tech weaponry, she redirects her focus towards exploiting her armor's defensive capabilities. Samantha engaged her enhanced shielding, minimizing the impact of Denali's strikes. But still, she was completely surprised when she found out that Denali was actually able to deal a lot of damage to the armor. It seemed that when she got back to the stronghold, she would have to change into another armor, or have this one repaired. She somehow managed to escape from the barrage of attacks that were launched by Denali. She had taken advantage of the momentum of the blow delivered by Denali, to create a distance between the two of them. Immediately after that, she decided to use her only advantage. Since Denali was also a human, she believed that she was going to be tired at some point. That was going to be the time that he was going to deliver the final blow. Denali on the other hand got frustrated. Having lost the advantage, she was forced into a passive mode. The only thing that she could do at that moment was to dodge and continuously dodge, hoping that she could get another chance to attack. As the tide of the fight fluctuated, Samantha's laser weapons continued to fire relentlessly, creating an ever-present threat that Denali had to constantly contend with. Yet, Denali, with her unmatched strength and unwavering resolve, pressed on, refusing to yield against the formidable onslaught. In the midst of this intense battle, it became apparent that Samantha's advanced armor provided her with a range of tactical advantages, especially in combination with her laser weapons. However, Denali countered these advantages with her superior combat skills, making use of every opportunity to exploit Samantha's weakness. In the end, this showdown between Samantha and Denali showcased the fine balance between cutting-edge technology and raw power. Samantha, equipped with modern armor and laser weapons, demonstrated the sheer destructive capabilities of advanced weaponry. Meanwhile, Denali, despite lacking such advantages, proved that skill, strength, and perseverance can be formidable weapons in their own right. But that was all to it. Since she was a human, then she was bound to get tired after a long period of strenuous activity. So, after a long 15 minutes, Denali was already sweating and panting. Although she was still trying to fight, she was only holding on through sheer will. Had it been another person, perhaps they would have already collapsed. Finally, something that Samantha had been expecting finally happened. Denali delayed to make a move, and finally, a laser beam hit her hand. Denali grimaced with pain, as a wound suddenly appeared on her arm. Due to the immense pain, she delayed to make her movements again. As such, she was once again hit by a laser beam on her thigh. At this moment, Denali had completely fallen into a disadvantage. And even though Samantha had also gotten tired, since she was at a passive mode, she was way better than Denali. "Hee, it seems that I am going to win this," Samantha stated as she laughed. "Hee, it seems that I am going to win this," Samantha stated as she laughed. Vroom. Vroom. Just then, her sharp ears detected the sound of a car engine that was approaching at a fast speed. Just from listening to the sound of the engine, she could tell that this was a sport car. What is a car doing all the way here? Samantha couldn't help but question herself. After all, the place where they were, there wasn't any road here. So, it was completely illogical for a car to come over here. She couldn't help but wonder if the car was coming over because of them. If that was the case, then who was it? Of course, since Samantha was able to hear the sound of the car engine approaching, Denali was able to do so as well. In fact, she would have detected it earlier had it not been for the fact that she was currently in pain. Even though she was in pain, she had managed to stagger back and stand in front of Celine. Celine wasn't feeling well at all. After all, the current situation that Denali was in, was all because of her. Even though she really would have wanted to give herself in, there was no way that she was going to do that. After all, the reason as to why they had come for her was simply because they wanted to extort something from Jack. And if they had to get her so that they can extort something from him, then it meant that whatever it was that they wanted from Jack was very important. Since she wasn't of much assistance to Jack, then she wasn't willing to become a burden as well. So, currently, she was contemplating on the choices on the moves that she could make. But as she was planning to make the move on which she had decided on, he suddenly had the sound of a car heading in their direction. She looked hurriedly in that direction. At this moment, her heart began beating erratically. She couldn't understand why, but there was a hint of excitement that was appearing inside her heart. Strange emotions appeared, and she somehow felt relieved. Then in front of their eyes, a three-color painted Bugatti Veyron suddenly rushed out. It didn't seem as if it was going to stop at any moment. In fact, it looked like it was going to crash into them. The Bugatti Veyron that was painted a mixture of blue, yellow and red, suddenly appeared. Currently, inside the car, the furious Jack was controlling the car, steering it towards Samantha. Especially when he saw that Denali was actually wounded, the anger that was in his heart soared again. At this moment, Jack's intention to kill someone was at its most high. There wasn't even a time that he had ever wanted to kill someone, like he currently wanted. Even though he wanted to kill those who had killed his mother, the feeling was completely different this time. The anger of losing his mother had already gone down for a long period of time. And this time, there was actually someone who wanted to steal away the only other person whom he loved so much, then he had no choice but to kill them off. The matter of the law and so on didn't even ring in his head. At this moment, all he wanted was to eliminate all the dangers that had appeared. Although he wasn't sure for what reason these people were looking for Nathan, he had decided that he was going to deal with them. Even if the strongholds were going to send another group, then Jack was willing to deal with them as well. In fact, he had already began contemplating about going to the strongholds. He had to make sure that he had eliminated the danger to the roots. Perhaps, if he went over there, he might actually find the reason as to why they were looking for Nathan. Upon noticing that the car was actually heading for her, Samantha frowned. Even though she knew that the car wasn't going to hurt her even if it hit her, as a lady, she didn't like getting hit. With swift movements, she managed to move to the side, completely evading the car that wanted to crash into her. Jack had already expected that. After all, the movements of the car were not as flexible as that of a person. So, his main aim was actually to attract Samantha's attention. But since she had moved to the side, Jack managed to stop the car in front of Denali and Celine. The eyes of the two ladies were already glinting with excitement and relief. They of course knew that this was Jack's car. After all, just by looking at the number plate, one could already see Jack's name on it. The car's door was pushed open, as Jack stepped out of it. He looked at the two ladies and the side in the relief. Although it was true that Denali was hurt, the injuries weren't fatal at all. From his pocket, he took out a body strengthening solution and gave it to her. You should know that the body strengthening solution is used in a situation like this. I'm wondering why you are always carrying them with you. Jack berated Denali. Denali on the other hand didn't say anything, and just took the body strengthening solution from Jack's hand and gulped it. The moment that the solution reached her stomach, she suddenly felt a warm current washing through her body. The injuries that she had suffered began healing at the rapid speed. All the pain that she was feeling a moment ago disappeared just as if it was an illusion. I think you should take a look at. Are you okay? Jack asked as he looked at Celine. Celine nodded her head. To say the truth, she had been afraid just a few seconds ago. But with Jack's presence, all the fear that was in her heart suddenly disappeared. If they were in another place, then she will have definitely jumped into Jack's embrace. But, she managed to hold back. Jack was relieved. He then turned around and looked at Samantha, who was looking at him with a smile on her face. Currently, Samantha wasn't expecting that Jack was actually going to arrive at this moment. She was so excited that she couldn't stop herself from smiling. But still, she maintained her composure and stated, "I never expected that you are going to come here this fast. But all the same, this saves me a lot of time." At the same time, she looked at her wrist, where there was a watch-like gadget. On it, she could see that there was a dot that was approaching them at a fast speed. She frowned for a moment and decided to end things fast. From her estimations, she believed that Eric was going to be here in about 5 minutes. This was just enough for her. But the next moment, he was completely stunned when she saw that Denali was back to her feet, just like how she was before the two of them fought. "Are you trying to play with me? Where the heck did you get the healing serum?" Samantha couldn't help but ask in a loud voice. She knew that if Denali was back to her peak condition, then the 5 minutes were not enough for her to deal with her, before taking away Celine and Jack. Jack and the party were surprised when they had that. That was of course especially for Jack, as he had never thought that there was something that was like the body-strengthening solution somewhere else. But all the same, he didn't want to think too much about that matter. He was going to try and get information out of the person in front of him. Samantha was surprised when she saw that Jack was actually heading in her direction. "Take care of her," Jack stated as he began heading for Samantha. Even though he wanted to kill her, he wanted her death to be valuable enough to him. To him, it didn't matter if the person in front of him was a lady or not. Since she had the intention of taking his girlfriend away, then she had to be prepared to pay the price. "What are you trying to do?" Samantha couldn't help but ask. "I'm just going to do something that can show you your mistakes," Jack stated coldly. And before Samantha could say anything, Jack rushed towards her. His speed was completely unmatched, as even Samantha was having a very difficult time following his movements. Before she could even detect where Jack was currently, she suddenly felt immense force hitting her back. Bang! Her internal organs churned, and she felt a sweet taste in her mouth. When she fell on the ground, she spat out a mouthful of blood. She was completely flabbergasted at this point. She couldn't understand what was going on anymore. Boom! And before she could react again, Jack's figure appeared in her vision. Jack didn't hesitate at all as he kicked her away. He wasn't willing to be gentle at her even though she was a lady. When it came to a matter of life and death, there was nothing like a gentleman. After all, if he was the weakest party here, then he definitely was going to be the one who was at the receiving end. Even though she was wearing her armor, there was no way that she could tolerate the pain that she was feeling. The armor that she was so proud of was actually useless in front of the blows that she was receiving. At a point in time, she attempted using the laser weapons, but he found out that they were missing. It was as if they had already been taken away, but she didn't even notice that. "Now, why don't you tell me why you are looking for me?" Jack stated coldly as he looked at Samantha, who was sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain. "Now, why don't you tell me why you are looking for me?" Jack stated coldly as he looked at Samantha, who was sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain. She stared at Jack, horror clear in her eyes. This time, she was able to tell the reason that he had beaten her easily. Jack was way stronger than her in that she couldn't even get the chance to use the weapons that she had. Furthermore, as she gazed at Jack's hand, she could see that Hugh was holding something. Those were obviously her gadgets that contained the laser weapons. But still, the thing that she was the most concerned about was that the person in front of her was not as simple as she had thought of him as. He was an existence that she was never supposed to mess with. For that reason, she was now full of regrets. But all of the blame that was in her heart was directed at Eric. After all, had he not come here, then she would not have followed him. So, he was the one to blame. Added with the hatred that she was having towards him initially, then she hated him even more now. How can a person of your level be here? It is not allowed. Samantha struggled to say these few words. As she looked at Jack, there was a clear hint of disbelief. "Why can I not be here? This is my home after all," Jack replied. He could perhaps relate to what Samantha was thinking. After all, a person of his current capabilities was definitely not supposed to be in such a place. Since these people believed that people of their caliber were only found in the strongholds, then it was definitely incomprehensible on how Jack had appeared here. In Samantha's mind currently, she was wondering how it was possible for someone with such terrifying strength to be able to appear here. Furthermore, it seemed that there was nobody who was keeping an eye on him. She was wondering if he was from another stronghold other than the one that she was coming from. After all, the way that the organizations present in the stronghold were like, They will always make sure to keep an eye on each other. That was the exact reason as to why she had managed to detect Eric leaving the stronghold. Since she was curious about what made him get out of the stronghold, she decided to follow. It was not just about the benefits of the organization that he belonged to, but due to the grudges that she held against Eric. Now, better start talking before I force you to. Jack stated calmly. He wasn't willing to continue wasting time with the lady in front of him. He was going to make sure that he could get as much information out of her as possible. After all, he had no clues about the people from the stronghold while they knew so much about where he was. It doesn't matter what your real identity is. For you to be able to become this strong at your age, you are definitely from the biggest strongholds. But no matter what, there's no way that I am going to reveal the secrets of our stronghold even if you kill me, Samantha stated. I will repeat myself again. For what reason are you looking for me? Jack didn't comment about what she said, but instead, he repeated the same question again. Samantha went silent again. It seemed that Jack was not interested in the secrets, at least for now. But still, what he was interested in was the reason as to why she was looking for him. But even she herself didn't know the reason as to why she was looking for him. She was expecting to get several answers out of him, so that she could know what it was that Eric wanted to get from him. Of course, she didn't know about Nathan. Had she known that Eric was actually looking for Jack, because he wanted to get information about Nathan's whereabouts, she will have definitely coughed in anger. Had Eric informed her about this, he would have not wasted her time looking for Jack. Instead, he would have spent her time to look for Nathan's whereabouts. After a moment of silence, Samantha finally spoke. I don't know the reason as to why I was looking for you. In short, I was looking for you just for curiosity. There's another person who was looking for you, and I decided to get you first before he did. At this moment, she didn't hesitate to mention about Eric. Since she was in this position because of him, then she will have to make sure that he suffered as well. The two of them had the same capabilities. For that reason, since she was easily defeated, then it meant that Eric didn't have a chance as well. You dare to play a game on me? Then just watch. I'm going to make sure that you and I go the same thing that I have. Humph. Samantha thought to herself in her mind. Jack's brows twitched. He really didn't expect to get a reason like that. He could tell that Samantha was sincere. Although he could tell that she was telling him this deliberately, he didn't care about that. In fact, he would be even more happy to be informed about the whereabouts of any other member of the stronghold. After all, they were a source of danger to the people that he loved as long as they were not taken care of. And where's that person? Jack asked. He could detect that there was a trace of resentment in Samantha's voice as she talked about that person. I think you should take a look at. He is coming. I think he should be here in about 2 minutes. Samantha replied. After spending some time on the ground, she had began recovering. That was an ability that was possessed by the people of her level. As long as she was given time, she would recover. Even though she would not be at her prime state, she would be capable of fighting again. The reason as to why she had recovered a little faster was simply because Jack's attacks were not fatal. They were aimed at making her feel pain, and not at completely injuring her. Jack could of course detect that. He had to come to find that, after he had gotten to the 10th level, he had began detecting several things that were always unnoticeable by him. Jack smiled coldly. Since the real mastermind was coming, then he was more than happy to entertain that person. For that reason, he decided to wait for a little while. After just about 3 minutes, Jack detected some movements that were heading their way. It seemed that the other person was in a kind of a hurry. Not long after, a silhouette of a person appeared. It is a man who had long beard. He looked around, both angrily and warily. When he saw Samantha on the ground, he completely ignored the other 3 figures present at the scene and shouted in anger. Samantha, I told you to get out of my way when I am dealing with the business that brought me here. You came over because you wanted to keep an eye on me, so stop doing what didn't bring you here. Eric was furious. Since Samantha had the capability to put something that would show her the location that Eric was in, then it was obvious that he too was capable of doing the same. And just today, as he was observing her movements, he found out that he was heading towards the outskirts of the city, after spending some time somewhere. And since he had been watching her movements all this while, he was able to tell that she was looking for what he was looking for. Since he had already made it clear that he was looking for a soldier, then it wasn't difficult for Samantha to get that information. Her movements today were very suspicious. That was the reason as to why he rushed over as soon as possible. He couldn't allow her to get her hands on the soldier, then get the information about Nathan. Although getting information about Nathan wasn't much of a big deal, it was going to be a very big deal as long as Nathan revealed a lot of information that he possessed. And that was what he was really afraid of. If Nathan revealed the secret that he possessed, then the secret that they had been hiding for a very long time will definitely draw attention from the other forces. He would then be the biggest sinner of the Panthers organization. That was just unacceptable for him. Do you think I want it anymore? Go ahead and take him if you have the capabilities. Samantha retorted as she struggled to get back on her feet. She was already angry at Eric. Now that he had appeared and dared to rebuke her, there was no way that she was going to remain silent. Moreover, she had been beaten up so badly previously. So, she wanted somewhere that she was going to vent her anger. Huh? Eric was stunned by the reply that he received from Samantha. He was expecting that Samantha was going to taunt him, and he was going to take out a lot, so that he could get what he wanted. But unexpectedly, she was actually giving up on the person that he was looking for. From his experience of Samantha's personality, there was no way that she was going to give him a way out. But it was only at this moment that his mind began thinking logically. Samantha was spoiled on the ground, and there were several wounds on her. With abilities, who could possibly be able to beat her into that position? His mind spun as he began thinking of possibilities. It was also at this moment that he began looking at the figures that he had completely ignored after he came over. There were 2 ladies and a single man. All of them were quite young and outstanding in terms of looks. But that was not what caught his attention the most. What attracted him the most was the young man who was standing a few meters away from them, watching the 2 of them curiously. The thing that attracted his attention on that young man was definitely his appearance. It was not that he was attracted by Jack's handsome appearance, but just his general appearance. The 2 of you look alike. It must be you that we were looking for. I have hit a jackpot this time. The Vice Supreme Leader is definitely going to reward me for this. I must take you back with me. With his eyes shining, Eric shouted ecstatically. The 2 of you look alike. It must be you that we were looking for. I have hit a jackpot this time. The Vice Supreme Leader is definitely going to reward me for this. I must take you back with me. With his eyes shining, Eric shouted ecstatically. At this moment, he had completely forgotten about the situation that Samantha was in. He didn't even take a second to think about how Samantha ended the way she was. All that was in front of his eyes at the moment was a glimmering treasure. He was already thinking about the rewards that he was going to be given when he went back to the stronghold. As for dealing with Samantha, that was something that he didn't even think about. After all, he believed that he was better than Samantha. What's more, there wasn't any good reason for the 2 of them to fight. Young man, obediently come back with me, or you may make me use force to take you away, Eric stated arrogantly as he looked at Jack. Samantha, who was looking from the side, couldn't help but look at Eric as if she was looking at a fool. At this moment, he even began regretting her choice back then. Jack on the other hand was somehow confused by Eric's words. Look alike? Look like who? That was the question that was currently ringing inside Jack's mind. Could it be that there was another person who looked like him? He immediately dispelled the thought that the other person was Jonathan. After all, he had broken to Jonathan not long ago, before he began receiving the monthly rewards. And then again, there was the excitement that was clear inside Eric's eyes. This person was completely excited after seeing him. It was as if he had found something that was so precious that he could actually die to get it. But of course, Jack didn't like the feeling that he was getting as Eric stared at him like that. He was completely dissatisfied with the person in front of him. The real orchestrator of the current situation was in front of him, and instead of actually trying to look for a way to save himself from the coming calamity, he was actually seeking it. Jack wasn't ready to waste a lot of words with the idiot. He was going to talk to him only after he had beaten him up. Taking a step forward, Jack's muscles contracted as he pushed himself off the ground, shooting towards Eric. Eric on the other hand was completely stunned. He was caught completely off guard by Jack's move. His pupils contracted to the size of a needle, as he hurriedly tried to react to the situation. His heart was already beating hard, and the blood inside his veins was already moving at a rapid speed. Just as he tried to follow the trajectory of Jack's figure, he was surprised that he couldn't actually follow it. The next moment, a heavy blow landed on his cheek, sending him flying. At that moment, a few of his teeth loosened, from the intense force that came from the punch that he received from Jack. Jack wasn't the least lenient with Eric. All of his moves were deadly, ready to beat up this guy to a pulp. With his impressive speed, he managed to completely dominate Eric. Not to mention about blocking the punches and kicks that Jack was sending his way. Eric was simply receiving a beating. It was as if he had become a punching bag, whose only role was to receive blows. Samantha on the other hand didn't even try to run away. After all, with the speed of that Jack had demonstrated, it was clear that she wouldn't be able to get away. As for taking Celine hostage, that was completely impossible considering that Denali, who had completely recovered, was standing next to her. She was not able to beat Denali easily previously, and that was not going to happen now, after she had been beaten up. And although she had recovered, she wasn't in a good condition at all. The armor on her body had also suffered heavy damage, and as a result, if she faced Denali head-on at this moment, her heavy attacks would definitely wound her. The most frustrating thing would definitely be the fact that she had completely lost her advantage, the laser weapons. Without them, she didn't have even a single advantage to dominate Denali. Bang! Eric landed on the ground, his face completely battered. The armor that was previously hidden below the clothes that he was wearing had already been revealed. At this moment, the armor was already rendered completely useless. Jack's attacks could not be underestimated at all. Although they had high-quality armor, there was nothing that they could do in front of Jack's attacks. In fact, even if the armors could actually block Jack's attacks, there was always a residual force that would land on their bodies. That residual force was enough to harm their internal organs. That was the most frightening part of it. Suffering from internal injuries was something that even people of their caliber would have to take a long time to recover from them in case they didn't get the healing serum. He was currently groaning, with some of his bones already broken. His previous arrogant demeanor had completely disappeared. In its place was a person who was completely miserable. I think you should take a look at. He really couldn't understand how he ended up in this situation. Everything happened in a flash. At one moment, he was the one who was asking the other party to come over or receive a beating. But in the next moment, he was completely beaten up. He had no chance to resist at all. This was only something that happened when he faced the current Vice Supreme Leader, or the other people who are also vying for the same position. In fact, he came to find out that the way that the other party was attacking was even more profound than his Vice Supreme Leader and the others. Now then, why don't you inform me the reason as to why you are looking for me, and you will have to tell me why you say that I look alike with someone. And I want to know the details of that person. Jack stated coldly as he looked at Eric was lying on the ground. At this moment, Eric was still grunting in pain, as he tried to endure the pain that he was undergoing. It was also at this moment that a certain thought flushed in his mind. How come I didn't think about something like that? I truly am an idiot. If the two of them are related, then it is obvious that he cannot be a weakling at all. How come I completely ignored something like that? As for replying to Jack's question, he didn't even think about it. There was no way that he was going to reveal the secrets that had been hidden in the organization for a very long time. As long as the secret was leaked, not to mention a person like Jack, the other organizations back at the stronghold will definitely try all means to get what they were hiding. As for him, since he was going to be the cause of the secrets being revealed, then he was going to die either way. All the people of the stronghold were always ready to die. So, he didn't think much about the threat that Jack had given. Samantha, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but swallow hardly. It was completely different when observing Jack thrashing a person who was at the same level as her. While taking the beating, she could only try to find ways to defend herself, and try enduring the pain that had already been inflicted on her body. But now that she had watched from the sidelines, she found out that Jack was a monstrous existence. If possible, she really wouldn't want to provoke a person like him. But she had already done so and there was no medicine to regret. All that she could do at the moment was to stay at the side, and wait for Jack to deal with her. She just hoped that Jack wouldn't be too hard on her. There was no expectation in her that he was going to spare her as she was a lady. After all, the meeting that she had received wasn't something that a person who cared about gender would administer to a lady. Upon noticing that Eric wasn't going to give a reply to the question that he had asked, Jack's expression turned even colder. Without saying another word, he went ahead and stepped on Eric's foot with immense strength. Crack! A cracking sound was suddenly heard, making others get goosebumps. They couldn't help but gulp as they watched the scene where Jack had completely broken Eric's leg. As for Celine, even though she didn't expect that Jack was going to be this cold, she was able to understand the situation. The other party wasn't here with good intentions. And ever since she began training, she had faced several gangsters during her training practical period. For that reason, she knew how sinister a human's heart could be. Since the one who was supposed to be a victim was her boyfriend, there wasn't even a hint of pity inside Celine's eyes as she gazed at Eric. If she had the strength, she would have definitely dealt with him personally. Arg! Eric groaned in pain. Although it was true that he had engaged in several fights, and had already suffered several severe wounds, at the end of it all, he wasn't a masochist. He didn't like the feeling of pain at all. While he was screaming, Jack suddenly grabbed his lower jaw. After exerting a lot of strength, he managed to make Eric spit out a certain green pill. That was the same pill that Yona had utilized to kill himself. This time, Jack wasn't going to allow Eric to kill himself before he received the information from him. After he had observed the interaction between the two of them, Samantha and Eric, he came to know that the two of them weren't in a good relationship. Another thing that he had noticed was that the two of them wore different armors. With the information that he had received from Yona about there being several organizations in the same stronghold, he knew that the two people that had come over were definitely from different organizations. Eric on the other hand panicked completely. He had never expected that Jack actually knew about the pill that was inside his mouth. This was something that every member of the Panthers organization had with them. It was always the last resort for all of them. Now then, you better speak up, or let me make you feel the pain that you have never felt in your entire life. Now then, you better speak up, or let me make you feel the pain that you have never felt in your entire life, Jack stated coldly. Immediately after that, he turned his gaze and looked at Denali and Celine, who was still standing at the side. The two of you get back home first. I will be back when I'm done with this. Both Denali and Celine were hesitant to leave Jack alone, but they knew how the situation was. There was not much assistance that they could give to Jack. For that reason, it is better if they left the area and not become a hindrance to his plans. Be careful, Celine said with concern in her eyes. Denali on the other hand gave Jack a nod, as she completely had her trust in him. Jack simply nodded in response. After that, he watched as the two ladies got into the Bugatti Veyron, before they drove away. With the two of them gone, only 3 people remained. Jack stared at Eric, who was lying on the ground, waiting for answers from him. Samantha on the other hand didn't even think about leaving. First of all, she enjoyed the feeling of watching as Eric underwent a lot of pain. And secondly, there was no guarantee that Eric was going to reveal her location to Jack after she left. But of course, that was on the premise that she managed to leave this place. As for attacking Jack together with Eric, that thought didn't even come in her mind. A person of Jack's caliber wasn't one that could be defeated with the number advantage. Even though they had advantage in terms of weapons and armor, they didn't have enough reaction speed to use them when facing Jack. For that reason, they were easily beaten up. Since she didn't want to get into Jack's bad books even deeper, she decided to be obedient and stay at the side and wait until he was done with Eric. At least, Jack hadn't shown a lot of killing intent towards her as he had done towards Eric. This was enough to tell her that, since she wasn't the mastermind, perhaps there was a chance that she could survive. On the other hand, he wasn't sure that Jack was actually going to kill him either of them. After all, the two of them were very important to the strongholds that they belonged to. Erica gritted his teeth as he tried contemplating on what to do. Currently, it was Ada he gave out the information, or faced the pain. The last result that he had with him had already been taken away, and as a result, he couldn't resort to death. When he saw that Eric wasn't replying, Jack got impatient and began working. Since he had gotten the professional medical skills, he knew the anatomy of a human being so well. For that reason, he knew what to do so that the person he was facing could experience the greatest pain ever. So, he began putting the medical skills to test, as this was the first time that he was using the skills after getting them. In just 5 minutes, Eric had experienced a whole level of pain, one that he had never dared to imagine that he was going to experience in his life. At this moment, he had almost broken down mentally. The pain that he had experienced was definitely unimaginable. The contemplation that was still going in his head about 5 minutes ago had already disappeared. He currently knew that, in order not to experience the pain again, he had to give the information that Jack wanted. So, without any further delay, he began telling Jack what he knew and was allowed to be said. I will tell you everything. The reason as to why I was looking for you was because of something that we found about 5 years ago. That is something that I cannot tell you what it is, because I will die the moment that I attempt to do so. Eric's speech was broken because of the panting that he was undergoing. His body was currently soaked in sweat, his hair completely messy. Around him, there was no longer the dignified air of a guardian of an organization. Jack listened to him tentatively, not wanting any detail to escape his ears. The thing that attracted him the most was definitely the reason as to why they were looking for him. At first, it could be understood that they were looking for him because he was involved with the disappearance of Nathan. But once Eric saw him, he actually changed his plans to look for Nathan, and decided that he was going to take him instead of Nathan. Since he was related to Nathan, there had to be some kind of resemblance between the two of them, even though it was not that much visible. But to the sharp eyes of people like Eric, he could definitely see that the two of them resembled each other, and so, they were related. But when Eric said that Jack looked alike with someone, that meant that there was someone who shared a lot of features with him. For that reason, that implied that the person that Eric was referring to was definitely not Nathan. It had to be another person. But the question was, who was it? That was the information that Jack was looking forward to. But the more information that he received from Eric, the more impatient he got. All the information that was being revealed by Eric didn't have anything to do with the person that was supposed to look like him. I think you should take a look at. I don't want to know all those stupid information that you are giving me. I want to know about the person that you said that I look like, Jack muttered coldly. Eric shivered when he heard Jack's voice. He could clearly remember the pain that he had undergone not long ago. That was something that he didn't want to experience again. I am sorry, but that is not something that I can tell you. There are a lot of restrictions that don't allow me to reveal such an important secret of the organization. Eric replied. At this moment, he really wanted to cry. Had it not been for the fact that the organization had put a lot of restriction on its members, then he will have already revealed the information. He didn't care about the organization anymore. For the people of the stronghold, although the organization that they belonged to was important, it wasn't that much important that they were willing to undergo a lot of pain just for it. Although it was true that the organization had done a lot for them, it was also true that they had served the organization a lot as well. So, it couldn't be said that they owed the organization anything. That was the exact reason as to why Eric had been revealing a lot of information, even though Samantha was present. Even though the information that he had revealed was not deep enough to affect the organization directly, since Samantha had gotten some hints, then her organization was definitely going to investigate about it. If they were keen enough, they would manage to get a lot of information that was capable of being used to deal a lot of damage to the Panthers organization. Jack was completely displeased by this. This was exactly the same thing that happened when he was questioning Yona. If these people from the organization couldn't give him any information that he wanted, then, didn't that mean that they were useless to be kept alive? As he thought of that, killing intent surged in his eyes. This time, he decided to completely eliminate any future troubles that might come if he released Eric. But before he did that, he thought of something. Who in your organization can give me the information that I am looking for? Jack asked. Eric had never expected a question like that from Jack. But all the same, he still replied sincerely. The Vice Supreme Leader, his two other competitors, and the Supreme Leader himself. At this moment, it could be considered that Eric had already betrayed the organization that he belonged to, but that didn't matter to him. As long as he didn't experience that pain again, everything was okay. Even though he wasn't afraid of death, pain was something that he didn't want to experience. How strong are they? Jack asked. Eric thought for a moment before finally replying. The Vice Supreme Leader, and the other two, are at the same level. They are both 10-star genetic warriors. As for the Supreme Leader, I don't really know about his capabilities at all. But I am sure that he has already passed the Star Genetic Warrior's rank. Since that is the case, then I guess I will have to pay a visit to this stronghold of yours. I will have to get that information out of the mouth of the Vice Supreme Leader that sent you over. Jack stated coldly. Eric's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't help but want to curse at Jack. What do you mean by saying that you want to visit the organization? Then why didn't you allow me to take you there myself, rather than beating me up in this manner? Eric had initially proposed to that Jack had to follow him back to the organization. But in the end, Jack beat him up because of the way that he proposed the matter. He had said that he wanted to take Jack back to the organization as a hostage, and not as a guest. Before Eric could realize anything, Jack made a move and crushed his neck. He didn't want to keep anyone that had ill intention towards him. Although it was true that he had been sent over, it was also true that he had been sent to find someone else. But when he saw Jack, he had actually been so greedy that he wanted to take Jack with him by force. That was the character of a person that Jack would not tolerate at all. If they were offered enough benefits, he was definitely going to attack again. Immediately after that, he turned around and gazed at Samantha. His gaze immediately made her shiver in fear. She had seen it all. Jack had killed off Eric without blinking. He was not afraid of the organizations in the stronghold. After he was done with Eric, Jack decided to deal with Samantha. Even though it was true that the lady in front of him wasn't the main culprit, she was still involved in the matter of trying to abduct Celine. That was something that was completely unforgivable in Jack's eyes. His intention was clear. Just like Eric, he decided to eliminate Samantha as well. Keeping any of them was definitely a risk that wasn't worth to take. Who could guarantee that after they left, they wouldn't come back and try to kidnap or kill the people that he loved? Keeping something that would come and bite him later was not in Jack's dictionary at all. Samantha felt her heart trembling in fear as she faced Jack's gaze. She gulped, as she attempted to think of ways out of the situation that she was in. At the same time, she was continuously blaming Eric even though he was already dead. If not for him, then why would she offend a person of Jack's level? What she didn't consider was the fact that Eric had tried to make her stay out of the matter, but due to the greed that she possessed, she was adamant about getting what Eric was looking for first. If not for that reason, perhaps she could have watched from the side as Eric got beaten up before getting killed. "What relationship do the two of you share?" Jack asked as he looked at Samantha. He was wondering how the two of them had come over, yet he could detect that Samantha didn't like Eric at all. Samantha went silent for a moment, before she replied, "He ditched me for another woman." That was all that was needed for Jack to understand the relationship between the two of them. It turned out that the two of them were in a relationship, but Eric had found another lady and decided to leave. Samantha saw that he could be with the other lady. Well, that is something that happens so often. As Samantha began thinking about the relationship that she had shared with Eric, before he threw her aside, she couldn't help but grit her teeth in anger. If possible, she really wished to be the one who had killed him off. The reason as to why she had been tolerating him all along was simply because of the agreement in the stronghold. The reason that she had to fight with Eric was personal, and that was something that was not allowed. "Okay then, what do we do with you?" Jack contemplated. He didn't find a good enough reason to kill her, but he definitely wasn't going to let her go easily. After all, she had injured Denali earlier on, and she had planned on kidnapping Celine. Samantha's mind began spinning, as she thought of ways that she could convince Jack to let her go. From the way that he had easily killed Eric, it was obvious that Jack was not a person that cared about the background that they belonged to. Additionally, they themselves didn't know about the background that Jack possessed. For him to be able to become this strong at the age that he was in, then it was obvious that he wasn't from any shallow background. "I can compensate you for the trouble that I have caused. What about taking my laser weapons?" Samantha asked. She could see that Jack didn't have any armor on him, and neither did he have any weapon. She thought that just like Denali, the two of them didn't have the equipment that were always given in the organization. And although the equipment that she possessed was very important to her as it was very expensive to purchase, she didn't think that it was a bad deal to exchange the equipment for her life. "What makes you believe that I am interested in that?" Just asked insipidly. He didn't believe that he would need such weapons from Samantha. After all, if he wanted to create the weapons, all that he would have to do was to acquire the materials, then get the skills that could be utilized to make the weapons from the system. Samantha was stunned after hearing Jack's reply. But after thinking for a while, she thought that if Jack really had such a big background, then it was obvious that he didn't care about the equipment that she was trying to offer him. It was obvious enough from the fact that the armor that she was so proud of was easily battered by Jack using his fists alone. Why would he want something that's going to be easily destroyed? But at the moment, Samantha didn't think about anything that she could offer so that Jack could let her go. She had already began panicking inside, trying to think of any way possible that she could get out of the current situation. Jack on the other hand continued watching her, as he waited for her reply. And after about 5 minutes, Samantha's eyes lit up as she looked at Jack. "What about this? I will be Celine's bodyguard for 1 year. Is that acceptable?" Samantha asked with expectation in her eyes. Jack on the other hand looked at her as if he was looking at a fool. "You first tried to take away my girlfriend, yet now you are expecting that I will send you to protect her? Do you take me for a fool?" Samantha had never expected such a response from Jack. But after thinking about it, it was true that she had ill intentions towards Celine. But now, she was offering to protect her. "I think you should take a look at." It wasn't just a matter of whether Jack could trust her or not. She had already created a bad impression towards him about herself. But this was the only thing that she could think of. There was nothing else that she could offer so that she could be let free. If it was information, the very basic information about the stronghold had already been given by Eric. As for the information that was considered important, that was something that she wasn't allowed to reveal. No matter how much she attempted, there was no way that she could do it. All that would await her would be death in case she tried to do that. She thought about it for a moment before suggesting, "What about this? I will sign a contract that I will be working as a bodyguard for 1 year. During this 1 year, no harm would it fall on the person that I will be protecting, unless I am dead." Jack was once again silent. But still, he still looked at Samantha as if he was looking at a fool. Signing a contract? Wasn't that just a piece of paper? How many people have already broken contracts that they had signed? Currently, if Jack dared to agree to that, it would be akin to him trusting her morals. It would be like he was believing that she was going to uphold whatever she had said. When Samantha saw that Jack had not replied, she couldn't help but feel bitter in her heart. After staying in Azima for some time, she definitely knew about the contacts that were always signed here. Those were just pieces of paper that if one party broke the agreement, they could use the court to make the other party pay for it. But she on the other hand couldn't be handled by the courts that were present here. Additionally, why would Jack entrust her with someone that he loved, only to allow her to break the contract and harm her? Even if he later killed her, there was no way that he was going to bring back Celine in case Samantha had killed her off. After thinking like that, she opened a small pocket that was present on her armor, and took out a piece of paper. After that, she handed it over to Jack. Jack was wondering what it was when he received the small piece of paper. He could tell that there was no danger coming from the paper, nor was there any malicious intent from Samantha. When he touched the paper, he found out that it was made from a special kind of material. It wasn't like the papers that were made from fiber that they always used here. But what made Jack speechless was the fact that the paper was completely blank. Now, he was wondering why Samantha had given him the paper. He raised his head and looked at her questioningly. He wanted answers from her. When she saw his questioning gaze, Samantha couldn't help but get flabbergasted. Now, she began wondering if it was true that Jack possessed a big background. If it really was true that he possessed a big background, then why was it that he didn't even know the contract form? Or could it be perhaps that he was wondering why she had given him something of a very low quality? That's what I have. Even though it may be of a low quality, it is just enough to bind me," Samantha replied a little nervously. Jack's brows raised. He couldn't help but do a double take at the piece of paper that he was holding. At the same time, he was wondering if the words that Samantha had said were actually true. "What do you want me to write in the contract?" Jack asked. Samantha was once again left speechless. According to the normal situation, it was always the other party who wrote the conditions that she was supposed to follow. But now, Jack was actually asking her what she was supposed to do. That piece of contract form can be considered yours now. You can decide on what it is that I have to follow, considering that I will be working as a bodyguard for 1 year, Samantha replied. Just after Samantha's words fell, a system prompt appeared in front of Jack. You have received a contract form. The effect of the system multiplier can be applied. Does the host intend for the contract form to be increased in terms of quality or quantity? You have received a contract form. The effect of the system multiplier can be applied. Does the host intend for the contract form to be increased in terms of quality or quantity? Jack was immediately flabbergasted by the system prompt. He had never expected that something like this could actually be multiplied by the system. Presently, he began thinking about what choice to make. Even though he was completely tempted about the second choice about the increase in the quality, when he thought about going to the stronghold, he decided against it. After all, he wasn't sure about how many people the stronghold was going to send before he found them. For that reason, Jack decided on the first choice, an increase in the quantity. Multiplier effect applied. You have received 100 contract forms. Immediately thereafter, Jack was expecting to see that the contract form in his hand was going to change into 100 of them. But, he was surprised that nothing happened. System, what's going on? Why is it that I am still left with a single contract form after the multiplier effect has already taken effect? Jack asked in his mind. Host, this is something that you can retrieve as long as you want. Just like all the rewards that had been granted to the host previously, the contract forms can also be retrieved like how you did when you took the rewards. Jack was finally relieved after knowing that the system wasn't playing a prank on him. Subsequently, he looked at Samantha, who was looking at him both anxiously and nervously. Do you happen to have a pen? Jack asked. Samantha shook her head because that was something that she didn't carry this time. She had left the pen back in the apartment that she was staying in temporarily. She had expected that she might face Eric during the time that she was out. Since that was the case, then it was obvious that they might engage in a fight considering that she was involved in something concerning him. The pen was special. Unlike the contract forms that could be acquired easily back at the stronghold, the pens were so rare. Every member of the stronghold that was part of the upper echelons was only given 2 of them. For that reason, they had to be careful not to lose them. After all, the materials that were used to make the pen were not easily found. And these pens were the only ones that could write on the contract and enable it to be effective in binding people who were strong as them. When she saw that there was a change of expression on Jack's face, Samantha hurriedly explained. Thereafter, she said, "We can go back, and I will give it to you. I left it somewhere safe." Of course, since the pen was something rare, it wasn't something new to find that the pen that was possessed by another person had been stolen. Since there was Eric and the 2 of them were not in good terms, Samantha had never dared to let the pen stay in a place where Eric could find it. She had done all that she could to make sure that the pen was well hidden. Jack remained silent as he began thinking about what to do. After a while, he decided to go with her back to her apartment to get the pen. He had to ensure that Samantha had already signed the contract before she was allowed to be close to anyone that he cared about. Jack then looked at Samantha, and he could only shake his head. In the way that Samantha was currently, it was definitely impossible for her to go back to the city the way she was. She had to at least have a change in her clothes. So, Jack immediately took out his phone and contacted Gabriel and informed him to come over and pick them up. Gabriel was always around in the capital city. Since he was hired as Jack's personal pilot, then he had to be in the area where Jack was. This was so that he could be ready to fly him anywhere in case there was an emergency or Jack just needed to fly somewhere. Jack then remained silent as he waited for the helicopter to come over. As for Samantha, since she had heard what Jack had said, she too didn't say a word and stood at the side as she waited. Approximately 15 minutes later, the sound of a helicopter approaching reached the ears of the 2. They looked up and saw that there was a helicopter that had come over. This was the Eurocopter that Jack had been given by the system as a reward. Since the area that they were in had already been devastated by the fighting that had happened here, then the helicopter didn't have much trouble to land. After Gabriel landed the helicopter, he looked at the devastated place and couldn't help but wonder what happened here. He wondered if there was a certain type of weapon that the military had been trying here. I think you should take a look at. After all, other than several pits that had appeared on the ground, the trees and other vegetation had become charcoal already. This was the effect of the laser beam that was used by Samantha during the fight against Denali. After he got down from the helicopter, he was surprised as he looked at Jack and Samantha. Samantha was indeed a lady who was of a good standard in terms of beauty. And currently, her situation didn't look that good. As for Jack, he was just standing by the side, waiting for the doors of the helicopter to be opened. He still had various plans that had to be taken care of after he left here. Gabriel, who had just come over, couldn't help but do a double take at Jack. At the same time, he thought to himself, this boss of mine surely is something. He is quite ferocious. As he thought of that, he looked at Samantha's tattered clothes. Thereafter, he gave Jack a look that only men could understand. Of course, Jack could already imagine what Gabriel was thinking about. After all, Gabriel didn't know about the reason as to why Jack was here. In his mind, it was just about a scene where a man and a woman were together in the forest. And they were so deep in the forest in that there was no way that another person was going to find them easily. Perhaps, one could already imagine what would happen in such a situation. Of course, he didn't bother to try explaining anything. Not like it was going to cause him any problem if Gabriel thought that way. So, he simply got into the helicopter and waited for Gabriel to fly it back to the city. "Where are we going to, boss?" Gabriel asked after everyone had settled inside the helicopter. "Tell him where we are going," Jack stated as he looked at Samantha. He didn't know where Samantha was staying, so she was the one who was supposed to give the directions or coordinates of the place that they were supposed to go. Samantha borrowed a phone and used the map to point out the place where they were supposed to go, and immediately after, Gabriel flew the plane in that direction. Slightly after about 10 minutes, they arrived at a location that was just slightly away from the heart of the city. This area was full of buildings that were residential places. In short, they were apartment buildings. After the helicopter landed on the roof, Jack took a blanket that was present inside the helicopter and handed it to Samantha to cover herself. After she did that, the 2 of them got into the elevator that was present on the roof and went towards the lower floors that was the 15th floor. Samantha's room was simple. Since she was here temporarily, she didn't buy anything after getting inside her self-contained single-bedroom apartment room. Jack waited in the living room as Samantha entered her bedroom. She stayed inside for almost 30 minutes before she finally came out. It seemed that she had hidden the pen so far away that even she herself was having a lot of trouble getting it out. Jack didn't take the pen from her. Instead, he handed over the contract form for her to fill it up. Even though she had never expected that Jack was going to hand over the contract form for her to write the conditions, she still sincerely wrote all the conditions that they had agreed upon. In the contract, she wrote that she would ensure the safety of Celine, and wouldn't let anything happen to her unless she was dead. Additionally, she included the fact that she wouldn't dare to harm any person who was close to Jack or Celine, as long as they didn't attack her first. In addition, she included something that made her want to scream. After all, she was a supreme being back at the stronghold, and was used to being the one to command others. But this time, she had included that she was going to follow all the orders that were given by Celine and Jack to her. Even though she was not willing to do that, she had decided that she was going to go all the way to ensure that she was going to be safe. Unlike the people who were from the Panthers organization, the people from her organization were not fanatics. There was no way that she was going to risk her life and end up dead in case there was another option, or there was no enough reason for her to do that. As for the punishment that came after she broke the contract, it was direct death. After she was done, she didn't hesitate to prick her finger with the needle that she had brought over. Thereafter, she dropped her blood on the piece of paper. Then, she handed it over to Jack. Even though it was true that Jack didn't know about the contract form, he still read it first. After he saw the conditions that had been written there, he didn't say anything else and pricked his finger as well. Of course, he used the weapons that belonged to Samantha to make a small wound on his finger. Thereafter, he dropped his blood on the piece of paper as well. Then, something magical happened. After that, he dropped his blood on the piece of paper as well. Then, something magical happened. The piece of paper that was in his hands disintegrated. A golden light shone on it, as the small fragments of the paper flew into the air. Subsequently, they divided into two and charged towards what Jack and Samantha. Even though Jack wanted to evade, he found out that he couldn't even move. It was as if he had been locked in place. The golden fragment of paper sunk into his forehead, and at that moment, Jack felt that there was a connection that had been formed between him and Samantha. Presently, he felt that he could completely control Samantha. Of course, there were some of the things that he couldn't do, like controlling her life and death. Of course, that was controlled by the contract. As for who it was that was to pass the judgment as long as the contract was broken, Jack had no information about that. Presently, Jack couldn't help but feel the wonders of the world. It seemed that he had to do a lot more exploration so that she could find out what it is that this world had hidden. Previously, he had only aimed at creating an empire that was his in the business world and other sectors. But this time, it seemed that this empire of his was just at the bottom of the well. He had to get out of it so that he could explore the outside world. The system suggests that the host should remain patient and update his system authority to the second level before trying to explore the world. Jack had never expected something like that. But still, that was something that he intended to do first. He was eagerly awaiting the new functions of the system that he could access at the time that he would have the second level authority of the system. As he was thinking about how to speed up in the process of the system upgrade, another system prompt appeared in front of him. You have earned a temporary slave for 1 year. Multiplier effect can be applied. Host, please select whether to have a qualitative increase or a quantitative one. Jack didn't know what to say at that moment. He could only stare at the small screen that was in front of him blankly. At the same time, his mind was already wondering, can this happen as well? Isn't the system too overpowered? Jack's breathing stopped for a moment. His mind began spinning at a fast speed, as he began contemplating about what decision to make. After all, he had a choice to make. Angel, can you please help me understand what comes after a qualitative increase? Jack didn't want to make a choice without thinking about it. So, he decided to understand everything first. With a qualitative increase, the current temporary slave that is possessed by the host will have a dramatic increase in strength and other abilities. Furthermore, the loyalty of the temporary slave will be increased to the maximum level. As for the period that the temporary slave will remain, it will be for 1 year just like it has been stated in the contract. This is something that cannot be changed presently due to the low authority level of the host to the system. Jack's mind went blank again. He couldn't believe that something like that really existed. But at the same time, he was quite disappointed that the period that he would have the temporary slave was only for 1 year. The system couldn't increase it at all. At this moment, Jack really wished that he could have increased the period that Samantha was going to work as Celine's bodyguard. But it had already happened and there was no way that he was going to change that. But then, Jack thought about something that didn't make sense to him. A temporary slave? What was that? According to what he believed, he and Samantha had come to an agreement that she was going to obey his commands while protecting Celine for 1 year. Subsequently, she would be free. Additionally, this was a suggestion that she had brought up. So, Jack had not forced her to take on the role that she was currently taking. So, how come she was a slave at the moment? The host doesn't understand the contract that you have signed with Samantha. After signing the contract, everything that she has written on the contract must be followed to the latter. In case she fails to uphold her end, she will be obliterated by the force that upholds the contract agreement. And since she decided that she was going to obey your words, and she is not your subordinate, then she is a slave. He doesn't have a choice at all. As long as you command her to do something, as long as it is not related to her life, then she is going to do it, or face the punishment of breaking the contract. Since she doesn't have her freedom, then she is no different from a slave, and the period that she will be a slave is 1 year. Jack finally understood. But still, he was wondering what kind of mystical powers could actually make a contract like this. And at the same time, he was wondering where the people of the strongholds found the contract forms from. I think you should take a look at. This was something that could actually bind a person who was as strong as Samantha. And this was something that only happened in fantasy. But on this day, Jack happened to see it happening with his own eyes. Okay then, what about the quantitative increase? Jack asked. The quantitative increase is just the system granting the host 99 other temporary slaves that have the same capabilities as the one that the host currently possesses. But different from Samantha, these other 99 don't possess a personality. They are no different from puppets, as they are not humans. Although they are in the shape of humans and may behave as humans, they will follow all the instructions from the host, even if the host orders them to kill themselves. Jack's mind nearly blew up when he received this information. After all, who was Samantha? She was a strong person. And from the information that he had received from Eric, he knew that people of Samantha's caliber didn't hold a small position in the organizations that they belonged to. Even in Eric's organization, they only had 12 of them that possessed abilities of the same level as him. But he, on the other hand, was going to be granted 99 people who possessed the same abilities as the guardians of the organizations. Even though it was true that these 99 were not actually real people, that didn't matter. As long as they followed Jack's instruction, then it was enough. If he found a way to deal with the people at the top ranks of the organization, then the rest would literally obliterate the whole Panthers organization. Jack was really tempted to rush to the stronghold and ask the Panthers organization about the reason they had been looking for him and Nathan. Even though it was true that the organization had not been looking for him actively, he was sure that as long as Eric passed the information back to the organization, they would come looking for him. Samantha, who had already felt the connection that had been formed between her and Jack, looked at him. She was expecting him to give her a set of instructions. But she was surprised to find out that Jack was simply staring at the air in front of him. Every so often, his expression would shift to excitement, confusion, confidence. She wondered what it was that Jack was thinking about for him to be like that. But she didn't dare to interrupt him. She stood in her position as she waited for him. On the other side, Jack finally came to a decision. Angel, I would like to get a quantitative increase. Multiplier effect applied. You have received 100 temporary slaves. The 99 slaves can be summoned by the host anywhere. They can appear and disappear according to the host's wishes. Note: the 99 temporary slaves will disappear the moment that the contract between the host and Samantha is nullified. Jack was once again surprised. He couldn't help but wonder why the system had somehow become overpowered at the moment. Or was it just that he was the one who had not been utilizing the system to the maximum? Then, if that was the case, Jack immediately began thinking about the ways that he was going to utilize the system to complete the condition that had been given for him to upgrade the system authority to the second level. The 99 temporary slaves that he had received would disappear as long as the contract between him and Samantha expired. For that reason, he had to go to the strongholds within 1 year in case he wanted to utilize the 99 temporary slaves. Even though he had already begun planning about what he was going to do when he got to the stronghold, He didn't want to risk anything. He wasn't sure if the system was going to grant him another 99 temporary slaves or permanent ones if possible in case he got another slave in the future. The host has to know that the income that the host gains has to be legal. Samantha decided to become a temporary slave as a method of repayment for the mistake that she had made. For that reason, the system counts this as an income. But if the host goes ahead and forces other people to sign contracts to become his slave, then the multiplier effect will not take place. This is considered illegal income by the system. The host has to work hard to gain legal income before the multiplier effect can take place. Jack was once again reminded about the definition of income that he had received from the system during the time that he first received the system. It seemed that he had to depend on others wanting to become his subordinate through the contract, rather than thinking about taking in others by force. With that out of the way, Jack finally turned his attention to Samantha, who was still waiting for his instructions. You will simply follow the agreement according to the conditions that you have written in the contract. I do believe that you know where you can find her, right? Jack asked as he looked at Samantha. Yes. Samantha replied solemnly. She knew that since the contract had already taken effect, then she would have to obey every single command that she received from either Jack or Celine. When he saw that she had agreed, Jack turned around and left the apartment room. Samantha, of course, did not follow him out. She still had to put on a new pair of clothing. After she was done with that, she took the things that she considered important and left the room. Even though Jack had already left, she still had her ways of finding where Celine was. This was her ability. That was also the reason as to why she had easily found Jack, and had also known where Celine was. She had to protect Celine at all time. For that reason, she would have to live close to Celine. Anyway, she had not bought anything that would require her to carry it around. After leaving the apartment, Gabriel flew the helicopter towards the security company. Since Jack had noticed that the people from the stronghold could do anything to get what they wanted, he had decided to start taking precautions. For that reason, he had decided to deposit one of the temporary slaves in each place that he considered essential. The first one was, of course, going to be GVSL. That was a place where Tracy, Ayush, Livingstone, and the others were. When the plane landed, Jack headed towards the area where the special units that were part of the special team were training. All of them were being trained by the previous soldiers. Even the mercenaries that Jack had hired had also joined the fray. Even though it was true that they possessed skills, they still lacked a lot of discipline. That was the reason as to why Jack had stated that they had to undergo training. The area where they were training had already been expanded. The warehouse-like building had already been improved, and now it was so gigantic. But of course, just like usual, all the others who were not part of the special team were not allowed in this part of the company. It was a restricted zone. Even the staff members, who were considered as part of the top management of the company, were not allowed to come to this part. Only Tracy and Ayush were allowed to come over. After all, the two of them possessed the knowledge about the presence of the body strengthening solution. When he was sure that there was nobody observing him, Jack decided to summon one of the temporary slaves. No sooner had he thought about one of them, did a lady appear before him. The lady was dressed in an armor that was just like the one that Samantha had previously worn. The difference was that this armor didn't possess the emblem of the institution that Samantha belonged to, and neither did it have a badge that contained the stars. Currently, Jack had already begun wondering how it was that the system was only granting him female subordinates. Denali was the first example. Jack had been expecting to get a man, but he was given a hot lady. And yet again, the system had given him another lady. Wasn't it afraid that Celine might misunderstand him? After all, he was only having ladies around him. The host has to know that, during the first period, the host decided on a genderless name. For that reason, the gender of the subordinate that you received was random. This time, on the other hand, the host gained a female temporary slave. With a multiplier effect, the host will definitely get another 99 temporary slaves that are of the female gender. Even though Jack had thought of something like that, he didn't intend to bother with the system at the moment. Instead, he focused his gaze on the person who had appeared in front of him. "Master, what are your orders?" the lady who had appeared in front of him asked respectfully. Jack noticed that her voice was plain, and just like her eyes, they were emotionless. It was as if she did not possess any human emotions. She had long black hair, emotionless brown eyes, and a face that stated that others should stay far away from her. Even though she was brought by the multiplier effect of the system, she didn't look like Samantha at all. In fact, She was like a completely different person. Well, that was expected considering that she was not a human at all, but just a puppet that had been forged by the system. Follow me inside, Jack instructed. Thereafter, he entered the building where training was undergoing after entering the security code. The scene inside the warehouse-like structure was just as how Jack remembered. There was an open ground, where all those members of the private security team were undergoing training. Some were sparring with each other, while others were practicing their marksmanship. I think you should take a look at. His appearance definitely attracted the attention of those who were close by. Greetings, boss. They greeted him enthusiastically. Ever since they had taken the body strengthening solution, these people were always happy to see Jack. After all, he had granted them an opportunity to become stronger than they had ever expected or dreamed of. Jack simply nodded in response. After that, he continued working inside the place. He was looking for Livingstone, who was responsible for the training. Ever since the time that Valnaro had appeared, Jack had managed to get 23 soldiers who came over to receive the body strengthening solution. Of course, just as usual, Denali would have to confirm if they were worthy to receive the body strengthening solution. The workload of the 23 soldiers had been so high during the past few weeks. They were the ones who were responsible for training all nearly 300 people. But due to the improvement that they had gotten from taking the body strengthening solution, they were capable of handling the work. Of course, Jack didn't let them work for free. They received their salaries, which was something that they would have never received somewhere else if they did the same thing. After all, apart from getting stronger, they were also being paid generously. There was a small office that was present inside this warehouse. When Jack got inside, he found that Livingstone was there doing some kind of paperwork. "What are you doing?" Jack asked curiously. "Oh, hello boss. I'm just doing some arrangement for the people of the special team. There are some of them that are always out, so I'm trying to make them have shifts." Livingstone was surprised when he saw that Jack had come over. "Still," he replied. Jack nodded as he thought that this was true. There were some of them special team guards that had been deployed to other parts of the country. But, since there was still training going on, they would have to take shifts so that everyone could train. "Right, I have someone here. She should be able to assist you in training all these people. Even you yourself can ask her for pointers." Jack turned around as he looked at the temporary slave, before shifting his gaze back to Livingstone. Livingstone was surprised when he heard that. He looked curiously at the lady who was standing behind Jack. He looked at her body's stature and couldn't help but be a little doubtful about what Jack had said. Was it really possible for the lady to be that strong? Even though he had already learned his lesson after taking the body strengthening solution, that all those that took the solution wouldn't have bulky bodies, even though they were strong. Even though he could see that the lady in front of him was wearing an armor, he simply considered it to be a ruse. How was he supposed to believe that in the modern age, there was actually someone who was using an armor? Noticing Livingstone's doubts, Jack didn't bother to explain. Instead, he turned around and gazed at the temporary slave behind him. He wondered how he was supposed to address her. After all, he couldn't possibly go around calling her a temporary slave, right? There had to be a naming system, right? The host can go ahead and give the names to the 99 temporary slaves. When he saw that system prompt, Jack wouldn't help but want to roll his eyes. After all, was the system just asking him to name 99 people? And all of them were ladies. He wasn't ready to start thinking about the names at all, so he decided to use code names. And the code names were, of course, going to be numbers. The one before you is code named 1. She is going to act as an instructor here, as well as the top security guard in the entire company. In case there is an emergency, you will have to inform her about that. Even though she possesses a great amount of strength, she won't to go around controlling people to do things unless I decide to use her to pass information, Jack instructed. Even though Livingstone found it strange that there was a person with a code name, since he was from the military, he was used to seeing several people using their code names during work time. But, this was the first time that he was seeing a person in the security company using a code name. After leaving a few instructions, Jack turned around and left. In his mind, there was a thought that was already boiling, something that he was planning to do. As for how Livingstone was going to handle number 1, that was none of his business. Since he could communicate with the 99 temporary slaves through telepathic communication, he had already informed her about what to do. He wasn't worried that she was going to cause trouble there. Added to the fact that she was completely loyal to him, she was definitely going to follow his instructions to the latter. After Jack left the training site, he boarded the helicopter as he headed towards other companies that he possessed on the way. He made sure to inform Valnaro about Eric's body that he had forgotten in the wild. He made sure to give him the coordinates. Valnaro was, of course, left speechless when he heard that Jack had actually taken care of the problem. He had actually killed him off, and they themselves had no idea about his current location just yet. But still, he still hurriedly passed the information to Major Alonso, who then contacted the colonel after he had confirmed that the body really belonged to the target. When the colonel personally saw Eric's body, he was silent for a long while. Thereafter, he began laughing hysterically. It was as if he had suddenly lost his mind. After he calmed down, he saw that the majors were looking at him strangely. But even so, he still managed to smile as he spoke. Do you guys understand what this means? This means that our military has won a lottery jackpot. This time, with someone as strong as Major Jackson. What are we supposed to be afraid of? If we face a strong enemy, then we can simply send him to eliminate them. The other majors also agreed to this. After all, they had personally witnessed how easily Eric had dealt with the soldiers that they had sent over, no matter how many. It was not just the weapons that he possessed, but also the armor that was on his body. That armor had already given them a hard time. Not even the bullets of the highest caliber could do any damage to the armor at all. For that reason, they knew that even if Eric simply stood in place and let them attack him, there was nothing that they could do to him. But the body that they had gotten, it was wearing a tattered armor. The armor that was indestructible to them had been battered to such an extent. That meant that the levels of attacks that Eric had encountered couldn't be underestimated. Furthermore, they had seen the scene where the fight had taken place. They saw how devastated the place was. That was something that they were slightly familiar with. After all, they had seen the damage that had been caused by the laser weapons that were possessed by Eric. This time, all the discontent that was present in the hearts of the other majors had already disappeared. In its place, there was only curiosity and admiration. But Colonel, will Major Jackson really agree to something like that? Remember that he can decide on whether to take the mission or not. Alonso reminded from the side. Even though it was true that he was happy that Jack was part of their garrison, he still knew that it was difficult to convince Jack to come over. He had already done his investigation and knew that Jack was not much into the issues about fights. Instead, he was into business. So, it was definitely going to be a hard task to convince him to start actively taking part in the military activities. When he heard that, the colonel finally stopped smiling. He thought about it and found that this was actually the biggest problem. Had it been that Jack was like the other soldiers that could be given missions, then it would have been better. We should be content with the fact that he is not our enemy but an ally, Edison replied. Colonel, do you perhaps think that all of this was done by Major Jackson? Could it be that he possesses such inhumane strength? The major who was responsible for the first company asked. The others also thought about the matter. They couldn't help but wonder about Jack's abilities. Could it be true that he was the one who had taken care of Eric alone? I think that this might be because he possesses a team that is strong enough to deal with that person. After all, if it's not a group of people, then it can only be that he might be possessing a strong weapon that can deal such amount of damage to that armor. The major that was responsible for the first company set out his thoughts. The majority of the majors also thought of the same thing. But then again, their hearts began filling up with worry. If it was true that Jack had a weapon of that caliber, didn't that mean that if Jack went against them, they would not have a chance to resist at all? This was something that none of the majors wanted. None of them wanted to have a time bomb that could erupt at any moment in their houses. But, each one of them had their thoughts about how they were to deal with the matter. Excuse me, but what are you trying to imply? It's already good enough that Major Jackson is on our side and not our enemy. So, if you start showing your aggressiveness towards him, then that would be enough to cause him to start moving away from us. So, why don't we put the matter aside for now and discuss it later? Alonso spoke. He was the one who had suggested that they recruit Jack into the military. For that reason, he thought that he had to make sure that no trouble headed in Jack's way. After all, he had interacted with Jack and had read the information about him. For that reason, he knew what kind of person Jack was. At least, he had never shown a bloodthirsty side by attacking others simply because he could do that. Edison thought that what Alonso had stated was right. He, too, had read the information about Jack. So, he trusted that Jack would not betray them at all. That was unless they betrayed him first. I think you should take a look at. Major Alonso is right. And for that reason, let's start a counterattack on those sneaky bastards. As he said these words, Edison was angry. Due to the sudden attack that was launched on them, they had lost several tens of soldiers before they were able to match the enemy's attacks. But still, they had already lost some of their soldiers. Yes, sir. All the majors that were present immediately responded as battle intent was clear in their eyes. Even though it was true that some of them might not participate in the counterattack, they were still looking forward to hearing that their enemy had been beaten up. Jack went around all the companies that were present in the capital city and the neighboring cities to deploy the subordinates. Thanks to the system, Jack could recall all of them anywhere he was. For that reason, Jack wasn't reserved at all as he deployed them. With them around, it was definitely going to increase the level of security. After he was done with that, Jack finally did something else on the following day. He went ahead and began making several preparations. The first one was to book a whole hotel for the following day. Since he wasn't ready to interrupt his income flow, he didn't use the Glaze Hotel. Instead, he went ahead and booked the hotel that he was intending to make bankrupt. That was the hotel whose owner was involved in the attack that was launched on the Glaze Hotel. Jack had already begun making plans. He was going to make sure that the owner of the Soaring Eagle. This was currently the biggest competition that was encountered by the Glaze Hotel. But even though it was referred to as competition, with the recent changes that Jack had made, that hotel could no longer compete again. This time, the reason he had decided on booking the entire Soaring Eagle Hotel was because he wanted to get familiar with the hotel that he was planning to take over in the future. Although he wanted to deal with the owner, he wasn't willing to have a fight between the two of them affect the life of others. So, he wanted to acquire the hotel to retain most of the staff members. Of course, he was only planning on retaining those that were serious in their duties, not the useless ones. After that, he didn't stop at that. Instead, he visited a jewelry store and bought something that was going to be a surprise. He had already placed an order the previous month, and it just so happened that the order was ready at that time. Then after that, he began contacting some of the people that he was familiar with to let them come over when needed. And after he was done with that, Jack began waiting for that day to arrive. At the stronghold, inside the Panthers organization, there was solemnity in the air inside a certain room. Inside here, there was Anthony and 4 other guardians that were colleagues with the late Eric. There was a frown that was etched on Anthony's face as he looked at the 4 figures that stood in front of him. What could be taking so long for Eric to bring over a single person? With his capabilities, he should have already come back by now, Anthony stated in a low voice. He was already becoming restless, since the other factions in the organization had already started becoming suspicious about Eric's absence. If they came to know the real reason as to why he was not here, then, they were bound to make his plans become hard to accomplish. The other 4 guardians also didn't know what to say at that moment. They couldn't understand how a mission that was supposed to be completed fast was taking so long. Could it be that he had encountered a problem? They couldn't help but wonder. Just then, the door of the room opened, and a lady walked in. The lady was none other than Patricia. Her expression was solemn as she entered the room. Antonio frowned when he saw her with that expression on her face. He couldn't help but ask, did something happen? Patricia took a deep breath before she nodded her head. Vice Supreme Leader. This is something big. Eric is dead. Silence descended in the room after Patricia passed the information.